Let's talk about China. Under pressure, rare earth exports from Beijing are down for the second month in a row. The two economic superpowers remain locked in trade disputes as Washington pushes to secure other supply chain options. The U.S. and Australia just signed a major deal to counter China's rare earth dominance, and President Trump is optimistic.
In about a year from now, we'll have so much critical mineral and rare earths that you won't know what to do with them. They'll be worth about $2. But in the meantime, we're working with Australia and other countries. They're working with us, too.
And the president just saying moments ago that he also expects to be able to make a good deal with China's Xi. We are going to continue to monitor Trump's comments from the Rose Garden and bring you any updates that we have. But this is a really important issue. The president has placed China front and center in this trade war, and he's taking no prisoners. Neither is Xi right now in this negotiation process, James, but bringing the Prime Minister of Australia, sitting him next to himself at the table, as we saw before, contrasting, for example, when Zelensky was sitting across the table, and inking a deal with them, showing the rest of the world that, okay, China, we're looking for other resources, other options. You are not the only show in town.
That's exactly right, Jackie. Usually, you pointed out right, the choreography of these White House meetings is the foreign leader sits across. Usually it's Secretary of State or Secretary of Treasury sits next to the president. The president was very smart to put the Prime Minister of Australia right next to him to send a signal to China. You are playing checkers, we are playing chess. President Trump once again has all the leverage. And let's not forget, this is not a hypothetical fear, David. This happened during COVID. They curbed the essential export of PPEs, of antibiotics. We saw the semiconductor crisis out of Japan in the early days of the pandemic. The semiconductors, the rare earth metals, the magnets, this is the new oil.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was the point that I made yesterday, and I just want to make it again and reiterate kind of what you're saying, which is that we've seen this story play out, and he's trying to head it off before it happens so that we're not in a position where all of a sudden China can say, if you don't do this, I've likened it almost to blackmail. If you don't do this, we will pull the plug on that.
Well, they did last week when China started those new export controls on the rare earths, and it started all that mania, right? What I think is interesting is that Trump started this conversation with Australia back in May. Right, so this didn't just happen over 2 nights, but it's happening over 4 months. But I thought it was so perfect, to your point, where they had him yesterday sitting next to him at the table. They signed this deal. They hold it up, $8.5 billion. China is no longer the sole source, and I think it sends a really strong message.
Not to mention, there are other sources. We're working on the Ukraine situation right now. We've talked about Greenland. These are all places, David, that are strategically important for rare earths. And so the president is, and what he's done in Alaska, also here domestically. So he's basically trying to shore up our own supply chain so that we're not reliant on China. And once that plays through the system in time and starts to bear fruit, then all of a sudden you've got a situation where you have a ton of leverage against China because they don't have something to sort of hold over your head.
That's right. That's right. What does China have to offer that we couldn't offer? Much more, much better, and much more inviting for the markets of these other countries who are thinking of making deals with it. I mean, they're really weighing out. First there was a ridiculous notion that the BRICS could somehow take over the dollar as the main currency of the world. I mean, it's just crazy, the idea. But China attacks. Trump deals with other countries. China attacks other countries. They literally, I think, attacked us with the pandemic and other things that haven't yet been completely pinned on them that they deserve the blame for. But one thing that China can do with these materials that we couldn't necessarily do is refine them, because it's such a dirty, caustic process that goes into refining. We've had history with it. It's not just Malaysia and China that have ugly histories in trying to refine this stuff without creating these toxic lakes and rivers, et cetera. We did it in California with terrible results. This was about 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. We've done it in Texas, in Lone Star. So there have been occasions when it's been tried here. We had regulations that prevented those kind of refining processes from happening. They would have to be changed. The president, of course, has a lot of power on the federal level to do that. But on the state level, he may not. He could work with states like Texas, for example. I don't think he could work with California. So those issues would play into all this.
Right. And there's lots going on in Alaska, to your point, although we're not certainly refining them there yet at the moment. We're not refining really anywhere. But there is plenty of supply, is the point.
Yeah,
and I think
that's
you
right.
made that very clear. We're not going to be dependent on.
What do you make of this, though? China's export curbs have also extended beyond the United States. Total rare earths magnet shipments falling 6.1% in September from August. That's according to customs data. Is demand just falling, or are they curbing to countries that are playing ball with the United States?
Well,
I wonder.
I don't think demand is curbing at all.
No.
Demand is high. But just to be clear, China played chess for the last 40 years on rare earths. We played make-believe.
Right.
Okay, so we are way behind, and it's of our own doing. We're changing that now, but China was smart. We were stupid. And so the question is, how do you catch up after you've done that? My concern is we try to play the same game China plays on this. We can beat them on rare earths with capitalism. Capitalism is the fastest way to catch up on anything. But if we play their game, if we play a very state-controlled game on this, I get very nervous about our ability to catch up. China knows that they've played chess for 40 years, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. They're saying to the world, basically, we dominate this. We've built all the infrastructure. All you virtue signaling countries that don't want to deal with, the fact that this is a dirty thing to do, we would love to see you have the guts to get into this now, right? Even in the United States, the Trump administration is pushing, but you've got I don't think we're doing really any refining here. We've got lots in the ground. We're not pulling a lot of it out. And you've got all sorts of people in this government on the left who would love nothing more than to undo everything Trump is doing right now the next chance they get power. So we are in very much a battle on this.
We are, but the stakes could not be higher because these rare earth minerals, these magnets are used in everything from the NVIDIA chips to the F-35 infrastructure. So we have to call their bluff on this. It was 23 years ago this month that Ross...
But they're not bluffing. Like, they actually built a legitimate position against
Well, I mean, the short-term bluff of the...
We have to actually call the bluff of the people on the left who said we don't need to do this stuff, we'll be okay.
On the point that you're making, which I think is so important about national security, and that's what the president has stressed when it comes to this issue specifically, 60% of the critical minerals right now from the world production comes from China, undisputed leader. But the Commerce Ministry, when it instituted curbs from China on this, said that it was worried about the misuse of minerals and in the military and other sensitive sectors. And I just find that so funny, so comical. The projection, right? It's classic to say they're worried about what could happen if the minerals get into the wrong hands.
That's right. And this is them countering our kinetic strategic advantage of physical warfare with economic warfare. End of story. And so when Secretary Bessent goes up there and says, we want to decouple, he is creating leverage in a world in which China is curbing exports to not just the U.S., but to countries all over Europe and South America. We have to go to that negotiating table with President Trump and President Xi and say, look, what do you want to do? Either we can decouple and take the rest of the world with us, and you can be on an island, or we can actually work together and move the global economy forward.
It's important to put a fine point on what you were talking about, Brian, which is that their whole Belt and Road show going to the most backward countries in the world, in Latin America, in Africa.
We just talked about
and
Colombia
in other parts
yesterday.
Of Asia, Colombia. But the point is, they would go to a place that was so backward that the people who governed could be counted on one hand.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the people, and they could be bribed very easily. So they would bribe. They would go into any place you could mention of those places. Some of them in my wife's hometown in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So I mean, they would go in. They would find the hands to grease with bribes. A $10 million bribe would go a long way with these folks, and then the Chinese would go into the deep growth areas of, for example, on the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, take out these beautiful old mahogany trees that they have there, take billions of dollars worth of resources from these countries with about a $10 million bribe, or maybe a couple of $10 million bribes. That's how they did business. The problem for them, their reputation has caught up with them, not only in Latin America, but also in Africa. A lot of African nations realized what they were doing, that, hey, this is our treasure that they are taking away from us. We're not going to do business anymore. If there's an opportunity for Trump to go into these countries and say, look, we deal fair and square with you. We will be able to work with you to provide you with what you need if we get what we need from what you have.
Yeah.
So I think it is a perfect opportunity to make these deals, and we got the perfect deal maker in office.
And just real quick, Kenny, like 20 seconds. Minerals and miners, that's a place you can invest if you're at home and you want to play this space.
Yeah, XME would be a great way. It's an
Yeah.
ETF, the Mineral Miners ETF. It's actually done very well this year, and it speaks exactly to that point. So yes, if people want exposure, that's a great place to get it.
Exposure, and it's a tangential AI play. It's not a direct play on the
Correct.
Mag 7 that people become so worried about.